Joffrey Baratheon was born into privilege, wealth, and royal power as the supposed son of King Robert Baratheon and Queen Cersei Lannister, raised from childhood to believe that the Iron Throne and all of Westeros would one day belong to him. However, hidden beneath the image of royal perfection was the secret that defined the instability surrounding his life. Joffrey was actually the son of Cersei and her twin brother Jaime Lannister. Even though Joffrey never fully understood this truth himself, he grew up inside a deeply unhealthy emotional environment shaped by secrecy, manipulation, and poor parenting. Robert Baratheon mostly ignored him, preferring drinking and hunting over family responsibilities, while Cersei spoiled and protected him constantly, convincing him he was naturally superior to everyone else because of his royal blood. Since nobody properly disciplined him or forced him to face consequences, Joffrey developed a dangerous understanding of power and authority from an early age. He learned to associate kingship not with responsibility or leadership, but with domination, fear, and personal control over others. Even as a child, Joffrey showed disturbing signs of cruelty and emotional instability. He enjoyed humiliating weaker people and appeared fascinated by violence and suffering. Rather than empathy, he valued fear because fear made him feel powerful. Yet beneath his arrogance and sadism existed deep insecurity. Joffrey constantly wanted to prove he was strong because internally he feared being seen as weak or insignificant. Growing up under the shadow of Robert Baratheon's legendary reputation as a warrior king only increased this insecurity. Joffrey sensed that many people around him did not genuinely respect him, and because of this he became obsessed with forcing obedience through intimidation. Since Cersei defended him regardless of his behavior, his worst instincts were encouraged instead of corrected. Every cruel action reinforced the belief that he could do anything without consequences. When Robert died and Joffrey became king in King's Landing, his personality grew even more dangerous because he suddenly possessed real authority without emotional maturity. Unlike wise rulers who understood diplomacy, patience, or political strategy, Joffrey believed being king meant unlimited freedom to satisfy his impulses. He confused cruelty with strength and fear with respect. One of the clearest examples of this was his decision to execute Eddard Stark. Although advisors had planned for Ned to confess publicly and be spared in order to avoid greater conflict, Joffrey impulsively ordered his execution simply because he wanted to appear powerful in front of the crowd. This single decision shocked even his allies because it intensified the war spreading across Westeros. Yet Joffrey believed the act made him look strong and decisive, when in reality it exposed how immature and emotionally unstable he truly was. Joffrey's treatment of Sansa Stark revealed the deeper cruelty within his personality. At first, he acted charming and princely, understanding superficially how a future king should behave. However, once Sansa became trapped in King's Landing and powerless against him, he transformed into her tormentor. He humiliated her publicly, threatened violence, mocked her grief, and emotionally abused her constantly because he enjoyed the feeling of control her fear gave him. Still, these actions reflected weakness more than confidence. Joffrey constantly needed reassurance that he was dominant because deep down he feared humiliation and loss of control. He wanted loyalty and admiration but lacked the emotional intelligence necessary to inspire either genuinely, so he relied on fear instead. His relationship with Cersei shaped much of his worldview. Cersei loved Joffrey obsessively and viewed him almost as an extension of herself. She protected him from criticism and consequences constantly, which strengthened his narcissism and entitlement. However, as Joffrey grew older, he also wanted independence from her because he desperately wanted to appear masculine and powerful. He often ignored her advice publicly and attempted to dominate conversations with her emotionally. At the same time, his relationship with Tywin Lannister revealed another side of him. Unlike Cersei, Tywin immediately recognized Joffrey's immaturity and instability. Joffrey feared Tywin because Tywin represented genuine authority, calm, disciplined, intelligent, and respected without needing theatrical violence. Around Tywin, Joffrey's confidence weakened because he sensed that Tywin saw through the false image of strength he constantly tried to project. As king, Joffrey repeatedly demonstrated that he did not truly understand leadership. He enjoyed public displays of authority such as executions, threats, humiliation, and torture, but lacked patience, wisdom, or political awareness. He reacted emotionally to embarrassment or criticism and surrounded himself with weaker people who encouraged his ego rather than challenging him. Much of his cruelty was performative because he desperately wanted others to fear him emotionally. Yet beneath this violent arrogance existed a frightened and emotionally fragile person terrified of appearing weak. His fear of losing control drove much of his behavior. Joffrey also symbolized the dangers of inherited privilege without moral development. He was raised believing his birth alone entitled him to absolute control over others, but nobody taught him empathy, restraint, or responsibility. Unlike characters who became cruel because of trauma or survival, Joffrey became monstrous largely because his environment rewarded arrogance and removed consequences from his actions. He grew up inside a political system where power mattered more than morality and fear often replaced genuine respect. Because of this, he developed into someone incapable of understanding humanity beyond domination and control. Despite his cruelty and arrogance, Joffrey's life was ultimately short and fragile. During the Purple Wedding, he died suddenly and helplessly in front of the royal court. Ironically, the king who constantly tried to appear invincible and powerful died terrified and unable to control his own fate. His final moments exposed the truth hidden beneath his personality all along. Despite all his violence and authority, Joffrey was emotionally immature, insecure, and fundamentally weak. He wanted history to remember him as a feared ruler, but instead he became remembered as one of the cruelest and most unstable kings in Westerosi history. Joffrey Baratheon's story remains one of the most disturbing psychological portraits in fantasy, because it explores how narcissism, insecurity, emotional neglect, entitlement, and unchecked power can create someone incapable of empathy or wisdom. He was not a tragic hero slowly corrupted by circumstances, but a boy raised in an environment where cruelty was tolerated, weakness was hidden behind violence, and fear became confused with respect. His life shows how absolute power placed in the hands of an emotionally undeveloped person becomes destructive not only for others, but ultimately for themselves as well.